Okay, so today's class we are going to talk about persistence, not as in persistence in life, but persistence when it comes to software development, abstraction of functionality, and publishing to the App Store. Uh, your app, whatever you've been working on, if you'd like to publish, we'll touch upon that today. How to do that. So persistence in our field means storing data. So to make the data persist from one session to the next. And we'll look at what the different options for persistence are and how to choose the best option. I think that this is the last major topic that we haven't covered, which basically you need to have a complete app. We have covered lots of different topics, and okay, hi Shahrukh, you asked a question, can we publish through Apple University? We'll talk about it when we come to the topic of publishing. So persistence, yeah, so basically we covered so many things, right? Now, if you're making an app, you would have some data typically that you would want to store. Well, let's see what the different options are and how to choose one. Functionality abstraction is another, this is more of a software development topic than just mobile apps. So what it means is to encapsulate common functionality in a parent class and use objects of the parent class in your code so that even if you're using a subclass, it does not affect the common functionality. You don't need to change your code. And this is not only useful in those cases, also useful if you're trying different options. So for example, if you are working with views on your layout and you can work with 3 or 4 different kinds of views, you create custom views, you use Android views. But if in your code you're relying on the functionality that the common parent has, the view class has, then your code won't change. A lot of the things will remain the same. For example, if you want to change the background color, instead of saying text view, using a text view object and changing its background color, and then if instead of text view, you go to some other custom view, all of that you don't need to do if you just go use the parent class as much as possible where appropriate. And finally, we'll look at publishing an app to the App Store. So I just want to check in with you guys how your projects are coming along. I'm going to ask you one by one. I just want to get a handle on how it is coming and if any of you need any help. So let's go alphabetical, which makes Aniket the first one. He just joined. Hi, Aniket. How is your project coming along?
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today is lecture about system of things on lecture.
I
How to
cannot
make
make
it.
out what you're saying, Aniket.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, Aniket, we'll come back to you. Let's go to Hamza. Hamza, how is it coming along?
So like I have not yet like it's still like 10% completed at a very early stage, a lot more to do. Just
Yeah.
started working on it.
Yes, yes. You wrote a very nice write-up, by the way. I like your the technical write-up and even the proposal. Very nicely done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Jagir, yeah, I already asked you, but have another chance at it.
Yes, I've completed almost 30 to 40% of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Digibarter app and it is similar to Kijiji.
Mm-hmm.
And till now, it's working like I am able to upload an image and saving the favorite ones. That's it.
Okay, good, good. Michelle, how is it coming along with your project?
I'm just starting. I've got my some of my background research done for some of the different dog breeds that I'm using in my app. So I have the information on them, but I haven't started implementing yet.
Perfect, perfect. Like I said before, the most important phase of your development is getting your ideas together, the background research like you're doing, to know how you're going to implement. That is the most important. Implementation goes much faster if all of that is already thought through. So let's ask Ravi, how is it coming along, Ravi?
Actually, I have completed like 20%, I think, because I have created the screens for that I will need and just trying to put everything where it belongs. Sometimes I put something in the home page and then I thought like it doesn't look good in it. So I'm just kind of sorting it out now.
Yeah. Remind me what your app is, please.
I'm making a calorie counter app.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
sometimes I think this will look good in the home page, and sometimes I don't think because there's not too much stuff, but like I just want to make it look visually good. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Good, good. And Charuk?
Hi, so I haven't started the Android app yet. I almost finished the iOS one. I have added like authentication, user can log in account, it's connected to Firebase, everything. So it's mostly done. I still have to connect to the backend that I created in the API class. So I finished the backend as well for those things, and I just need to connect them so I can, because my app is like a booking app, so I can create booking and then keep track of those, like what user has. And I'll have to look into creating the other side of the user because I have two users, right? I have cleaners and I have regular people. But the other app, like I mentioned in my write-up that I won't have time to create two separate apps. It's just like Uber has like Uber app and Uber driver app. So the other part I'll try to do manually in the database and see how it works. And
Good.
I'll start Android this week. I just wanted to get Logic everything set up, so I just now have to yeah, I'll have to learn how to make the UI in Android, but all the logic part I finished it.
Perfect. I think what you've done in iOS will help you when you're doing the Android.
Yes.
Let's go back to Aniket. Aniket, have you resolved your mic issue?
Yes, can you guys hear me now?
It's better. There's still a bit of noise, but I can make out what you're saying.
So yeah, we have completed about 35%. Because we guys don't have iOS, but we just have Android. So we're working on it. It's doing good.
Okay. I didn't, again, there's a lot of disturbance. All I heard was you're working on it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know that such bad on my microphone.
It's
I will
okay.
change it.
Okay. Okay. All right. No problem. Let's continue with the class. So data persistence, what are the different options? So, most of you are working with projects like what we heard just now. Some, Jagir is doing some bartering, digital bartering. So there is information, people will create ads, profiles, whatever. Those things need to be saved. Like this, each and every one of you may have requirements to save information. So the information can be saved in different ways. And here are some of the options. This is a, probably covers most of the options available to you. So the first one here is shared preferences. So shared preferences is an Android mechanism we saw when we implemented the settings screen, how that all those settings get saved to the database of shared preferences. You can create items in shared preferences, its key value pairs, which are not there in your settings screen. So you can use it like a database key value pairs. We used this last semester. Anybody remember what we used it for? We used the shared preferences to save some information.
Yeah, I remember using it. I'm not, but I think maybe we used for maybe 2, 3 projects or 2 projects.
We used it to save tic-tac-toe game data.
Yes, exactly. That's one thing. Maybe others I typed. That one I remember. So that's where we used it. So that's one option. The second option is you can save information to a file, just like any computer system. Android is, it's a full operating system. It has access to a file system and all those things. So basically, you can save information to a file. You can do what is called object serialization. So your objects, whatever you're creating that need to be saved, let's say your model class, you can implement a method which serializes it. Basically, it's a Java convention. If your objects implement a serialization method, you can save them using that method. So whatever information, whatever properties, etc., state, whatever you want to save of an object, you create that function that saves it, and you create the reverse that reads it and then decodes that information to your format. So that is one. And then you can also use local databases, SQLite. Some of you may already be using this in your apps. Anybody, I have read in your write-ups, who is using SQLite?
I will use it. I did use it in my last semester's assignment as well. So I might use it this semester for this app as well.
Good. And finally, the more modern option is using cloud storage. So cloud storage, meaning you can have a database. Actually, there is one more I should add here. You can use in the cloud, you can create your own server and have a MySQL database. On the server, again, you have many such options, but let's say MySQL. You are storing information on your own server, or you could use a hosted MySQL service. So some Amazon, I think, provides something similar. And then there are no SQL databases, meaning these rely on you saving JSON objects. So unlike MySQL databases, they don't have predetermined fields, columns, and rows that fill those tables. These are, each object has an endpoint and it is stored as a JSON object, and you can retrieve using the endpoint. Those are NoSQL databases. And again, you have many options. Firebase itself has 2 options. One is called Firestore and the other is called Real-Time Database. So these are different possibilities of how you can store your information. These are a couple of good pages to refer to. Android has an entire documentation on data storage. Let me share this with you. I'll post the link. So there is your link, and let me open it. Okay, I think I gave you the storage overview, but this is really the overview of the data storage section. So many options. And in storage, they're talking about 4 types, just the way we have just described, app specific. So this could be shared actually shared preferences stay here. So this is your internal storage, files, etc. And then shared storage is, let's say your app takes pictures and you want the user to be able to see those pictures even outside of your app. So you could save it to the SD card or the folder where the pictures go, etc. Databases. These are the things we already talked about. And this entire documentation here is a good resource if you get stuck, if you want to, just go dive deeper into what any of these means. The other one that I found interesting was a tutorial that I will also share with you. And I'll show you what it is. So this is the tutorial, and this person here, he has given you examples of 4 of the storage types we talked about. Shared preferences, saving to a file that is internal, meaning private to your app, external, meaning any other app can also read it, and SQLite. So this is also a good tutorial if you want to practice some. We'll do some of this in class today. So you get to try it hands-on, and if you have any questions, etc., we can cover them. So before we move further, I want to talk a little bit about functionality abstraction. What is it? What is functionality, and how will we use it? So the way we are going to use it is basically we are going to implement, we'll take a sample application and we'll create multiple ways of saving and retrieving information. That is a very good use case for using abstraction. So what we want to do is we want our code, wherever we are saving and retrieving, to not change. We can just change the object which is doing the saving and retrieving. And all of those objects, for example, if we implement a method using shared preferences or using files or using a database, all of those objects have certain functionality that is in common. So for example, all of them will save the information, whatever it is our schema for saving is. Let's say we are saving key value pairs. So all of those methods will take the key value pairs and save them. And similarly, let's say we are retrieving. When we retrieve, we need to supply the key. So saving and retrieving, that's the common functionality of all of those types of methods. So we can implement a base class which does just that, or even not even a class. We can just have an interface which defines those two aspects of the functionality. And then we create subclasses. So when we implement it, you will see how easy it is to switch from one to the other without having to change, literally you just change one line of code and you can switch from shared preferences to files or to database, etc. So this is something we'll look at. So this is our what we are going to do. We are going to try these options in our requirements. The app we create should be able to store information, and we'll save 2 pieces of information: name of the user and their phone number. And then we want to be able to retrieve it, update it, or delete it. And you'll see that this you might hear from time to time: CRUD, create, retrieve, update, and delete. These are the 4 things you must do as a part of data persistence. Okay. So what we will do is we'll use a simple app. Our objective here is to learn persistence. It's not to create a complex app. So we'll go back to our basic activity template. And what we will do is on the first, if you remember, basic activity has two fragments. We used it probably last time. I don't remember where exactly we used it. We've used it multiple times. So on the first fragment, it just says first fragment, and there is a next button. And on the next page you reach, there is a previous button. So what we'll do is on our first page, we'll ask the user to enter the name and the phone number. And when you press next, we'll save this. And on the second fragment, we'll retrieve those values and display them. So we get to do all of it. We get to save, retrieve, and if you do it repeatedly, you're doing updating as well. So let's do this. Let's start a new project. Okay, start a new project. Choose basic activity. And as before, I like you to use your name. In the name of the project. And the rest of the settings are good. Just say finish at this point. And Android Studio is going to do a bunch of things for us. We have all seen this before. Twice we have seen this. We have basically tried to understand everything that it gives us, how it relates to each other. So what we have to do now is we have to let Gradle is their build tool. It reorganizes all these files. This is how it appears in your file folder, in your file system. What Gradle does is it is going to reorganize this so it becomes easier to access the things we are interested in. It will reorganize it as a mobile app. And this, depending on, usually takes a few moments. So there it is, it's finished. And suddenly you see that it says Android here. This is what it did. Your project looked like this, basically. All the things. If you want to go to the Java files, you have to keep going in. There's a lot of levels to travel, but if you go to this view of it, Android project, it directly gives you the manifest, Java, and resources, things that we really want to use. So we know that this one here has created 3 Java files for us. And the main layout, let's just run this and you'll see what it's doing. And then we'll start. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We have seen this multiple times. So we'll wait for it. This is my test run of the same thing. You will see just this app. So what we'll start doing right away is we'll add the elements we need to our views so that we can work with them while the emulator is loading. It won't let me do much until it finishes what it's doing. So this is the first fragment we see here in the design view. And there is the next button, and this is what we'll modify. This is where we'll ask the user to provide the information, and our next button will tack the functionality onto it of saving that information. And this is where we'll be able to choose which method we are using. So this is what we have, the template that Android has created for us. So there is a next button and there is a previous button, and basically they keep cycling between each other. So what you want to do is in your first fragment first.xml, this is what it says. We will change this, the text of this, it says hello first fragment here. We'll change the text of it. So for that, by now, all of you know that you have to go to the strings file and change it. So we will change it to user information. Okay, so that's it. And this is where user information saving, we'll be saving from this screen, and the other screen will be retrieving. So we'll add that word. And the second fragment we will be retrieving. When we come to the second fragment, we'll deal with that. So this is what it is. What I want to do here is I want two editable text fields where the user can enter the information. So right now, this is all nicely laid out. It's a vertical chain centered horizontally. We want to insert two items. There are many ways of doing it. You can reconnect some of these drop items. What I find the easiest when I have to do this is to just erase all the existing constraints and add what you want and rebuild the chain. That way there is very little chance of misconnecting or things like that. So that's what we will do. We'll say clear all constraints. It's warning us here that there are no constraints. And where do we look for the editable text? So these are all the text options. Which is the one we will use here? Text view displays static text, and plain text is what we will use. It allows us to ask user to enter something. So we'll add two of these, okay? And right now it has a default value of name in both of them. Let's change the properties. The first one will change its ID to, let's call it name field. And its text will leave it as empty. But in HTML, there is in an input, you have something called placeholder. You've probably seen it in other places as well. React uses the same concept. When you're building apps using React, in Android, we have something called a hint. We'll just give it a hint of that name. So basically, it shows up in gray here. It's telling the user what to enter here, basically. Same thing you will do to the phone number. We'll call this phone field. We'll delete its text. So change the ID to phone field. Delete the text. We want no text. We don't want any default text. And the hint is where we will say phone number. Okay. So now you should have 4 things here. Select all of them. You can do command click. And what we want is we want these to be chained. put in a vertical chain, so they will be equispaced. And right now, horizontally, they're not constrained. So again, right click, and while they're all selected, and say center horizontally. And there it is. So that's our empty template. We can run this now. Here you will see some warnings. I'm not going to bother fixing them, but you should know what to do with it. Okay, there are actually two warnings. No, there is one that I should talk about. So there is one called use autofill, and then there is hard-coded text. So use autofill. So your apps, may use some common things. Like for example, the user's name or phone number. These are common things. And you can tell the operating system whether you want those things to be auto-filled or not. Auto-filled, what it will do is it will prompt the user like, okay, this seems to be asking your name. Do you want to autofill it? So if you don't want that, you can disable it. Otherwise, Android will prompt for common things. So we can say, choose the second one, set important for autofill to no. So what that does is it will not prompt for autofilling. We're just testing here. The same thing, this must be about the phone field. So this is an important thing to know. Whenever you use an edit text type, an element of type edit text, it is going to give you this. Okay. Hard-coded text is because we use the name as the hint. So that is an easy fix. You can just say fix and it will create a string for you. Let's just do that one.
What is the option for autofill in the attributes? So because I selected yes for autofill, so if I want to change it to no, how can I change that?
So let's see in the code. There. So in the code, I don't know where it is in the design, you might be able to locate it. But otherwise, you can just change no to yes to no in the code in the XML.
Okay.
It's good to know the XML part as well. Sometimes it's much easier to just go there and change it rather than trying to figure out. Okay, what is this? This I have never seen before. Phone field suggests this is a phone number but does not include phone in the input type. Okay. What is our input type?
Yeah, there's one for phone in your text input types. We didn't use it.
Yeah. That's okay. I think we can just ignore this. Missing input types. Okay, let me just get rid of this hard-coded text. Whenever you use hard-coded text, it's going to complain, and these are very easy to fix. And this is also good for localization. Something we talked about last week. ID text. Okay. ID name field. ID phone field. So this is, I think this is what it's talking about here. We are using text person name. We could use phone. And then what it will do is, for the keyboard, it will prompt just the number keyboard. It uses this information. Right? So that's what it did. You expand this input types. And also, yeah, something useful. If you're asking for a phone number, you don't want A, B, C, D, etc. So you just give them a number. Or if you're asking a PIN code or stuff like that, number only input. Okay. So now you run this and you should see these 4 things on your screen. So we have this. Right now, you can enter whatever you want. It doesn't do anything. It just lets you enter it. Okay, so you see, now it's giving just a number here. We come back, it will be blank again. Okay, that's where we will take the input and we'll display it here in the second fragment. We want to do the exact same thing. We want to do the same exercise here. Here we are retrieving information. So I'm going to change its text to user information retrieving. Okay. And as before, I want to just actually clear the constraints. And this time we are just displaying, right? So we can use a text view. We'll add 2 of these. Okay. So ID, I'm going to change its ID to name display, DISP is what I'm using. And its text view, its text, we'll leave it show name, something like that. So change the ID. So when we are referring to it in the code, the code will be more readable. Android gives you default IDs, but those are like, this one was text view 1, text view 2, like that. Not very useful. So for the phone number, change it to the ID to phone display. And text to show phone number. So we have these. Now we'll do the same exercise of aligning them and putting them in a chain. So select just the 4. I had the constraint layout also selected. Select just the 4 elements and go with chain, create vertical chain, and then you can align it horizontally. Okay. No problem here. Missing constraints. I just added constraints. Oh, I used align. I'm sorry. I should have used center. You have to center horizontally. I used align, so they're aligned, but they're not centered. So they got aligned. All their centers got aligned, but not with respect to the parent view. So we probably have some warnings here of using hard-coded text. So if you click on that, any of these warning icons, it will show you all of them, and you can just fix and accept whatever resource name it gives. Or if you don't like it, you can change that. But these are easy to fix, and I highly recommend that you do this in your code. So now there are no warnings, and all our strings are now, instead of having a hard-coded text, it is from the strings file. Okay, let's run it, and so far we should have set up the structure of asking the user for information and then being able to display it. So this is where we will ask and save the information. Right now we haven't implemented that part, and this is where we'll display it. And because it goes in a loop, we can, try changing it and see if it gets updated and all that. And you will see that we won't pass this information from one view to another, which is also possible. What we'll do is we'll save it, and then in the next view, we'll retrieve it from there. Okay, everybody with it so far? Okay. So all of you are with it. Oh, I'm reading the chat messages. Aniket, you had a message earlier which said it shows error. What was it about? The link? Okay, okay, good. So now we have got that part where we are about to, we can display, retrieve information. What we will do is we now want to create that abstract functionality that we talked about. So this is another, this is just, like a nice way to also use it in practice instead of just talking about abstraction of functionality. Abstraction is hard to understand if it is abstract. So we'll do some concrete examples here. So what we'll do is we'll create a new interface called storage behavior, which implements the ability to save and retrieve data. And then we will implement an abstract class out of it, which will implement this storage behavior and provide us certain constants. So if we are going to, let's say we are going to use key value pairs. So those keys we can define as constants in this base storage. And then we'll subclass for each of the storage options. That's what we will do. So let's start with implementing this interface. And another thing you can do at this point is, because all of those things have to do with storage, we can create a package. So what you do is you right click on this in your Java code folder and then choose new package. So new package, and we will call it storage. So all the stuff related to storage does not clutter this main folder. And now on the right click on the storage package and choose new Java class. And from here choose an interface. And we will call it storage behavior. So interfaces, I'm using the word behavior on purpose. Interfaces typically define behavior that you can implement in a class. Sometimes you're only interested in the behavior aspect of something. Like for example, those listener objects we keep using, on click, listener, this, that. They're all interfaces which define a behavior. What happens when a click occurs? So that's what interfaces do. Call it storage behavior and press enter, and this is what it will do. It will give you an interface. And an interface defines a bunch of methods. You can also have properties, but not recommended. So we will define to save data, and I think I need to say public void save data, and this will take two arguments. We are going to work with key value pairs. And unlike a class, you cannot implement here. You cannot do this. This is an interface. You cannot have a method implemented here. So what you do is just put a semicolon. You're just defining. These are just headers. And the other one we will do is we'll return a string and we will call it retrieve data, and this will take one argument key. This defines our storage behavior. Now we can implement different methods which which basically inherit this behavior, and all they have to do is have these two functions. Okay, so we've got this. Anybody still working on this part? Okay. Now what you do is now you implement a new class. So right click on the storage again, the package, and choose new class, new Java class. And this time we will call it base storage. So this is the base class of all the storage methods we will implement. So these are, understand why we are doing this, why abstraction. Let me take the example of let's say, one of your projects, the DigiBarter project that Jagir talked about. They are creating ads for objects, different, a Kijiji like app. So in that app, there are many different types of ads. So for example, if you go look at an ad for the car, a used car. Used car ad has many fields like what make is it? There is a limited number of makes in the market. It's a pretty large number, but it is still limited. It's finite. So you may have all those as an option. You may have as an option model for whatever make you choose, years, stuff like that, right? Similarly, you go look for an ad for an apartment. An apartment has other features like how many bathrooms are there, how many bedrooms are there, are the utilities included, all of those. So these are objects, these are objects of classes which define something that can be sold, that can be put listed on an app like that. So, however, there are things that are in common. Like, for example, when was the ad posted? Who posted the ad? All those things, they are common. That can be your base class. So if you are looking for, if you want to search for ads posted in the last one day, you don't care what type of ads they are. You just use that field. So over there in your implementation, your objects will be the base ad class. There won't be the car ad or apartment ad. That allows you, that abstraction allows you to work at any level of detail that you choose. So that's how you can use this in your apps. So call this new Java class base storage and press enter, and it's going to give you the base storage class. So here now we will say this implements storage behavior. Okay. And as soon as you do that, this underline will appear complaining that must either be declared abstract or implement abstract method so and so. More actions. See, because each one of those methods we are going to try is going to implement its own save and retrieve, we don't need to implement that method here. We can just make this class abstract. What that means is that you cannot instantiate it. This class cannot be instantiated. You cannot have an object, create an object. You can instantiate the subclasses. So why are we doing this? Because we want certain constants to be available to all the subclasses, so we don't have to repeatedly define them. What are our classes, our static objects that we want. These are the keys that we are going to save the information using. Okay. So this gives us an abstract base storage class. Just like the Kijiji or the barter example, you may have a base add class, but there are no adds of that class. It just encapsulates the functionality that is common to all the other adds, like real estate ads and used cars and furniture and whatever else, people services, etc. Certain things are common, you put it in an abstract class. So we have an interface. We defined this abstract class to just be able to give this. Sometimes you may have other functionality that your abstract class can implement, which is common to all. Like the same example I gave earlier, when the ad was posted, you can implement it in your base class. Okay, now what we want is we want to start. Let me go back to our presentation. So we have done this much. We have defined the interface, which basically defines behavior. We have an abstract class to define certain constants. And now we are going to subclass it for each of the storage options. The first one being shared preferences. This is a reinforcement. We have done this before, but we'll do it again. So what we will do now is we'll create a class, which is a subclass of this abstract class we just created. We'll call it using shared preferences. And in this, we'll implement a constructor and the two methods which are defined in the interface. Okay, so now let's create that class. Let's new Java class. And since this is using shared preferences, I'm just going to call it using shared prefs. And it is going to be a class. So we'll use this name and press enter. And this one is going to extend. Which one are we going to extend here now? Yes, base storage. So now it's going to complain again that must either be declared abstract or implement methods. So we can, this time we'll choose implement methods. We want it to give us the methods, the stubs. So when you click on that, Studio will ask you which methods. It will present both the methods. You leave them as it is and say okay, and it will give you the two methods. So this is where we'll save the data, and this is where we'll retrieve and return it. Right now it is returning null. Okay. Now, shared preferences. How to use shared preferences? Shared preferences. Let's see if this is the place. Okay. So shared preferences object, you retrieve a shared preferences object, but this requires you to have a context. When you start an app, each activity has its own context. It runs within a context. And that context allows you access to the shared preferences object. So we need a context in this using, shared pref class. So how will we do it? We will have a declare, we'll declare a constructor which receives a context as an argument, right? So this will say context is not imported, just press Alt Enter and it will import it at the top here. And because we are using a context here, we want to hold either that context as an object or the shared preferences as an object, the one we retrieve, so that in the save and retrieve information, we can use that. So we have a choice. We can store the context and then just do shared context.get preferences anytime we want to retrieve it. So let's just store the context here. And in here, what we will say is context is equal to C. So this class variable, we assigned it to the argument we received here. So now we have a context. We can use that context to retrieve shared preferences and save information. How do we do that? Write to shared preferences. This is what we are looking for. So we have to retrieve a shared preferences object, and then from there we retrieve a shared preferences editor. This editor is what allows us to change values in the shared preferences. And then we just put our string. So we'll build this code there. It's not very difficult. So what we'll do is shared preferences equal to context dot get shared preferences. Okay. It asks for some arguments. What are they? Basically, what it wants is, I'm going to show you the documentation. It's easier to talk about it. It wants, okay, you can actually, there are two things you can do. You can either get preferences. These are common to all the activities of the app, common space. Whereas you can have a named shared preferences object, which allows you to specify the name for a collection, the collection of those key value pairs. So that's what we are doing here. We have got the shared preferences that we specify as a collection. So we can just say file name here. And the second argument it takes is the mode. If you start typing mode private is what you will select, and it will autocomplete to context.mode private. What is this? What is this line? I know some of you were not in the previous course where we did this, so I'm just going to spend a minute talking about it. We retrieve these preferences and we are using get shared preferences instead of get preferences. Get preferences does not ask for a file name because it uses the default file name. It's shared across the activity. Whereas if you specify a file name, whatever you save now will be stored in a local key value pair database under this file name. So when we are retrieving it, we have to use this file name. And mode is whether this information is accessible to other activities. That is what we are specifying. The next thing we do is we get the editor from this. The editor's job is to allow us to edit. So, oops, I have to give it a name, variable name. Okay. So now we have the editor. Pretty simple so far. Next thing we do is we put our string. So right now, see in this example, we've kept it simple. All the information we save is going to be stored as a string. So we just say put string and we go with key value. So this puts it into the editor. Now this editor, what it is it's in the memory. And it has created your key value pair in the memory, but it has not returned it to the disk. To write it to the disk, you go editor.commit. That commits it to the disk, to the hard disk. And the why it is like this is because you may have to save multiple things. You may do, editor can also save the same editor object. You can put multiple information, pieces of information, and then commit at once, just for efficiency. So this here will save our data. Retrieving it is also pretty simple. We get a shared preferences object, same one. You can actually copy and paste that line here. And our value we will retrieve from this. To retrieve value, just like we have put methods, right? You can editor dot, you will see you can put strings, integers, other types of objects. To get, we have to be more specific as well. We have to decide what we are getting. Then this is your job as the developer to know what was saved as a float, what was saved as a string. We know we saved a string, so we'll say get string. And this takes two arguments. One is the key, so we'll put the key, and the second is the default value. In case the string is not found, what to show? So we'll just say not found. And now we return this value. This is our storage class, that uses shared preferences to save data and to retrieve data. So far, so good. Okay. So what we will do now is, I'm going to, first of all, split the screen so we can look at these methods while we use them. And in the top screen, I'm going to open this main activity. Let's open main activity. Why are we going to open it? Because this is where we will define, we need to create an object here that will allow us to store the information, store and retrieve. And this object can be used in first fragment, second fragment, anywhere. What we are going to do is we are going to create a static object of the type base storage. Call it storage object. And right now we can't initialize it, you see, because if we want to instantiate the this using shared preferences class, we need a context. At this point, we don't have a context. The activity class has not been created. So we will initialize this in our onCreate. So declare a static base storage object called storage object. And in your onCreate, after this fab on click listener, we'll say base storage Okay, base storage, it is not finding because it's a static object. So we have to go this dot base storage. Okay, what is this problem? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm calling it storage object. The problem is with me. Right? Storage object is equal to new using shared preferences, and we can pass the activity. So what this is doing, this is a static object. We are initializing it to an object of this type. Static because we only need one of it. And second, we don't need to keep on passing it around between fragments. Both of these fragments can directly access this object to save information and to retrieve it. That's why we declared it as static. If it was a class, if it wasn't a static variable, it was a class variable, then we have a job on our hands. Somehow this first fragment needs to know what it is, or we need to use instantiate it in the first fragment and then in the second fragment, and we are spreading code around. So when we want to change from shared preferences to file or database, we have to go everywhere, which is unnecessary. Now it's in just one line. If we want to change the method, we just change this one word we change, and we can change the method. Okay, are we up to this point? Okay, so next thing what we want to do is in our the first fragment is where we have the information we are asking the user. We want to be able to see what, get what the user entered and save it. That's our job. And in the second fragment, we'll do the reverse. We'll read what the user has entered in the previous screen and display it. So before we break, I just want to ask you, we're very close to the taking the break. How are we, just describe to me somebody, please, how are we going to retrieve the information in our Java code, information that was entered here in these? What are the steps? Okay, I want somebody who has not spoken yet to speak, if possible. So when this next is pressed, how do you know what was in this field? What are the steps? Come on, somebody better answer. I'm going to put it in the exam next week. Okay, anybody? What are the steps to retrieve information from here?
I can go if no one wants to.
Yeah, go ahead, Shahrukh.
So we'll find view, and based on that, we'll check if the text view are filled. If they're complete, on next button, we can save them in the preference, and on the other screen, as soon as that screen is created, we just retrieve them using that button. Use the class we created, the
So-
methods.
Yes, so the first step is to retrieve this view itself.
Yeah.
And then the second step is to get its text. And we want that gets text part to happen when next is clicked.
Yeah, we can also like disable the next text button until the text has some
Mhm.
text, right?
Yes, yes.
So,
All of that we can. Then we have to start listening and, start checking.
yeah.
For our purpose, we'll keep it simple. If it is empty, it will show up as empty in the next screen, basically. It just says whatever it's supposed to say. So good. These are the steps we'll do when we come back. We'll see how to get the name and the phone number. And then we have already created our shared preferences storage object. We'll just store it. Okay, let's stop here, 11:15 right now. We'll resume at 11:35.